Hello, it's Jim, the author behind the blog Reverse Engineering the Origins of SARS-CoV-2. This vlog is going to be a little different. It's titled MH370 Mystery Solved, and the parallels between the missing plane and the lab leak debate are eerie. So, if the Substack title looks familiar, I stole it from someone else. That someone else was Larry Vance, so we'll talk about him in a minute. But you can see the parallels between his book title from a decade ago and mine from a couple of years ago. So I read his book, and I'm like, wow, this guy figured it out, and no one else did besides him. And no one else is really talking about him besides me and a few others. So if you go online, there's all kinds of crazy conspiracy theories a decade after this crash occurred about what happened to the aircraft. So if you forgot, MH370 was the Malaysian airplane that disappeared over Southeast Asia in 2014. The airplane's beacon was turned off, but the military radar tracked the Boeing 777. Most assumed it was a malfunction or hijacking, myself included. A few hypothesized that the pilot locked the co-pilot out of the cockpit and depressurized the cabin. The first clue was that the Malaysian captain was from Penang, and the MH370 made a hard turn as if to give the pilot one last look at home. So that was a theory running around in 2015 when I was traveling in Southeast Asia. And I'm like, that's interesting, because this story wasn't a big one in the US, but it was a big one in Asia. I mean, a plane goes missing, and no one's found a trace of it ever since. So 2 weeks later, in 2014, a satellite company claimed to know where it was. While the beacon was turned off intentionally, the engines were still pinging the satellite maintenance schedule unintentionally. But unlike COVID's origins, you could debate MH370's whereabouts on Facebook and Reddit. For us lab leakers, we were banned on pretty much every social media platform besides Twitter. But you could do this, and people still do, debate the origins of MH370 or the whereabouts of it 10 years afterwards. For the next decade, the remote Indian Ocean off the west coast of Australia was the focus of the search area. Malaysia, China, and Australia funded the estimated cost of $150 million. It is out there in the middle of nowhere. I mean, on the map, it doesn't look that far, but it is so remote. No one's even mapped the subsurface down there. So they had to map the subsurface where they search for the plane itself. So they've spent the past 10 years and hundreds of millions of dollars at looking at it. And the idea is that someone somewhere hijacked the plane, or a rogue pilot, took it out here over the Indian Ocean and then went south for whatever weird reason, and then just put it on autopilot. Then it reached the seventh arc, and the autopilot kicked off once the plane ran out of fuel. And the last ping shows allegedly the plane going into a steep dive and plowing into the water right here at this precise location. So if we just search in this precise location, we won't be wasting $100 million. We'll find it eventually. And this was, for the next decade, what everyone was more or less saying. This is where it is. The plane ran out of fuel and it went into a steep dive, and it plowed into the southern Indian Ocean and is down there at this precise location. So we don't need to search the entire Indian Ocean. We just need to search for the seventh arc, the seventh ping. The last GPS ping was the focus of the search. But almost everyone missed the second clue. There was no floating aircraft debris field. That was a big clue that even showed up in some comments online. This one showed up in 2015, a timestamp basically from a pilot, a former captain of the 777, and this was someone talking to him, and he was a member of a pilot group, and they had been talking about it. And he told me, based on the design, there should be parts of the aircraft that should have been found if floating, if it ended there in the southern Indian Ocean or any body of water. He said the notion that a modern heavy aircraft would hit the ocean and not leave a debris field is insane. That's 2015, when they're still looking for it actively, heavily, in the southern Indian Ocean, in this little precise seventh arc area. There is no debris field. Not one piece of debris ever found in 2014 or even 15. The latest search area conducted in March 2025, a decade later, used the latest technology, robotic ships. The Malaysian government signed a $70 million no fine, no fee contract with Ocean Infinity. So they recently, I'm recording this in April of 2026, they recently called it off, Ocean Infinity. It sounds like they're done, and the search is over, and the plane will never be found. So there was one person saying this all along. We'll talk about him in a minute. But there was something, like the lab leak debate. There was an online group of academic lab researchers in the lab leak debate called the Paris Group. I think Richard Ebright, if you know who that is, in the lab leak debate. And, like most lab leakers blame China and Xi Jinping, the ones who did virology. Similarly, an online group of the IG, or the independent group of MH370 sleuths, formed to blame Malaysia. The mainstream narrative, driven by Boeing engineers, Inmarsat satellite analysts, independent group, and the Australian government, holds that the MH370 jet flew on autopilot, ran out of fuel, and crashed into the Indian Ocean at a precise location. By blaming the corrupt Chinese and Malaysian government, Western researchers can absolve themselves of blame. But more importantly, their Bayesian calculations have produced a lucrative, high-priority search area. People make a name for themselves. They're involved in the news. They're involved in the search. There's a lot to be said. If you have a a theory, if you will, with the GPS coordinate that says the plane will be found at this precise location of the 7th arc, this last little beacon that was given to the Inmarsat satellite maintenance plan. So the only problem, an old wise man has solved the riddle, and the search is pointless. Larry Vance paid more attention to the physical evidence that washed ashore near Africa than the satellite data over the Indian Ocean. So about a year and a half, 18 months, I believe, after the crash, parts of the plane washed ashore, not in Australia, over here in India, way across the Indian Ocean. So the rogue MH370 pilot was at the controls until the end of the 7-hour flight, and only 20 pieces of wreckage, the flaps, were recovered. So instead of the aircraft debris field being found here, where everyone was searching for planes and whatnot for months after the disappearance, it slowly started to wash ashore over here in India. And Larry Vance, paid attention to those pieces very closely, what kind of pieces they were and what shape they were in. So let's hear him in his own words. I've tried to interview him for this Substack post a year ago, and he did answer my questions, but he said, I don't want my answers published. I let the book do the talking. I don't even talk to journalists anymore. So I should adopt his mentality. Just let your book do the talking. For a complicated, counterintuitive subject, emotional subject like this, you really can't do anything besides put the truth out and let the chips fall where they may. So he's a bit of my hero. You know, the elder statesman, coat and tie, here at a very poorly titled YouTube talk at a Canadian college. It should be MH370 Mystery Solved. And I told him, why don't you just change the title of the YouTube talk to MH370 Mystery Solved and get rid of this, obscure Canadian college title? And he says the guy that uploaded it passed, so I can't. But if he did, basically title it MH370 Mystery Solved, I mean, this would have like 10 million views. It doesn't have, but a few 100,000, if that. That's how I found him. So everyone's conspiracy theories on MH370 has millions of views, of course, but the truth only has, thousands. So let's hear him talking his own words.
So right off the bat, we know this is, you want to move on, don't you?
No, it's fine. I think the point has been well made, that it's peculiar circumstances that don't add up. So I want to get right into this drawing that you've provided of a plane.
Yeah.
Essentially the plane that was involved in this accident. Can you just lead us through a few pieces that are important to this investigation and why you determined what you believe to be?
I'm going to tell you the two pieces that are the most important. And this is sent to us by the aviation gods. They gave us two things. They gave us the kings, the handshakes that told them where the airplane basically went, to the general area where it went. They also gave us two pieces that are, if you wanted two pieces, other than the data recorders, if you wanted two pieces from that airplane to figure out what happened for sure, you would pick the two that we have. One is called the flaperon. You see that where it says flaperon right there? There's a section about the width of these two tables together, and it's a little flap that comes up and down at the back of the wing with the rest of the flaps. And right next to it, you see outboard flap. The 1/3 of that outboard flap, a section of that flap, also was dislodged during the ditching. We can say it was dislodged during the ditching. Those two pieces are the very bulk of the evidence that is in this book that proves what happened to this airplane. The reason that these pieces are so important, I'll explain that to you. If the airplane is flying along as they say it was, at high altitude with no pilot, and it runs out of fuel, and it goes down into the ocean in a high-speed dive, those two pieces that were recovered would be in the up position, retracted fully up. They would be tucked in behind the wing because you don't want them hanging down making drag while you're going along, right? So they would be fully up. They would be streamlined into the airflow. They weren't. They were down. They were fully down. And this is what the book proves, along with many other things. Those two pieces, when they dislodged from this airplane, were fully extended down. Now, the only way that those pieces, that those flaps and that flap system could be extended is if somebody did that. They can't do it on their own. It doesn't happen with autopilot. It doesn't happen automatically when the airplane slows down. There is no other way than if Richard can tell you, you're sitting in the airplane, you got a switch there, a switch. You got a lever there that says flap. And the captain says flap down, and the co-pilot says, yes, sir. Down she goes. And down they come. And that's the only way. You have to move that. It's an intentional act. Not only that, to get those to move, the switch, the lever is electronically connected. Electronically, you have to have electrics to a hydraulic system that actually moves them down. You have to have hydraulics. You know where those come from? The engines. The engines produce the electrics and the hydraulics. You can do it with a backup system of APU, but we don't need to go there. The engines were operating. It didn't run out of fuel. It didn't run out of fuel. It couldn't, because if it did, those things couldn't be down. Now, the official investigation, by the way, disagrees with me. They say that these things were up, retracted. And they still hang to that. To this day, they say that. Unfortunately, they're wrong. They are very wrong. Those were down. And I don't know if we have time enough here for me to show you how I know they were down, but if you read the book, you'll become convinced.
Do we have pictures that actually show some evidence of that?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so we'll get to that.
The trailing edge is worn away. The leading edge is fine. That is high speed.
So this again speaks to
Crash in the
part of
ocean.
your
That's
theory,
low
is
speed
if
ditching.
it was, as the official investigation said, a nose-first, high-impact crash, this is what Swiss Air looked like.
These are pieces from my personal collection. That on the top picture there, what you see is what we call the sort table. When we took 15 months of putting the parts and pieces from Swiss Air 111 onto this table, looking for materials that showed damage of fire, in particular wires, small wires that were ripped apart. But those on that particular table, there would be thousands of pieces. That's how you get to 2 million. You do that for 15 months. We'll show you the difference between this and the wreckage from Malaysia here in a minute. But the bottom pieces showed the same. Here are pictures of what we were just talking about. You see in the picture on the left, the flaperon in the up position, streamlined, right? And you see in the one on the right, the flaps are extended down. You see, the flaperon goes up and down on a hinge like this. The other ones are on a hinge, but they also go backwards like this when they go out. They back up some away from the wing, and then they go down. That's how they're and it's done with big hydraulic cylinders. Big hydraulic cylinders drive these things. But that's, yeah.
You know, I never knew it was called flaperon, but I've flown enough, and I always look out the window and make sure that they move just as we're landing.
Yeah.
And they always do, so that's the good news.
It's a good idea for them to move.
It is. Here's a piece of wreckage. What is this, and what does this tell us?
That's the flaperon that was recovered that came to the shoreline in Africa. And if you notice a few things about that right off the top, first of all, it looks nothing like what we just saw in the wreckage from Swiss Air 111. In particular, if you look at the leading edge, see where it says leading edge there? That's what we call in the accident investigation world, that is called pristine. That is just about, I mean, it's a wreck, right? But it's perfect. It's got its full aerodynamic shape. It has its full aerodynamic shape at the leading edge, goes all the way around like it should. It has its full aerodynamic shape on the top and on the bottom, and it's pristine. It did not go through a crash into water at high speed. It simply did not. Can you imagine that? You work it out mathematically. That piece there from the front to the back would be destroyed by the impact that they're talking about in 4/100ths of a second. That's how long it would take for that to be destroyed. Do you think that any person in their right mind would look at that piece of wreckage and say that went through that kind of an impact? It just didn't happen. It couldn't happen. There's a depiction of what they say happened to the airplane. That's not what happened to the airplane. But in the book, there's a great description of the airplane breaking apart into 2 million pieces as it progresses down into the water. It doesn't go below the surface. Like I've seen television shows where you see the airplane diving down like a whale or something. I mean, it doesn't even get 2 feet into the. I mean, there's a great big splash, but it does not penetrate into the water. It comes apart at the surface, and it goes zip in a blink of an eye, and it's gone. It's gone. Simple as that. That's what happens to it. Now, this one here is the back. You can concentrate here on the back edge, the trailing edge of this flaperon. And you see the damage back there. The front edge is pristine, right? It's got a nice smooth round, no damage, nothing. The back end is all eaten away. It looks like somebody got hungry and just chewed it away, right? It's all eroded, what we call erosion. It's now I think that most people in here could figure out pretty quickly how you could get erosion on the back of that, right? If it's down, you can't get erosion if it's up, but if it's down and that huge friggin' airplane is skimming along the surface of the water, and that thing there is water's coming here and being forced down around the end of it, the bottom of it. It's just like a hydraulic, it's gone. And it stayed there long enough, a few seconds is all it would take to erode that from the back end. You know, unless this airplane was backing up, you can't get damage on the trailing edge. Like, who wouldn't, I don't mean to be sarcastic, but who wouldn't know that? Who wouldn't know that?
So Larry, here's where we're going to go here.
Yeah.
I want you to discuss how you believe the plane ended up in the water.
It's a great video. Watch the whole thing. Even better, read the book. But yeah, Larry Vance paid more attention to the physical evidence that washed ashore near Africa than the satellite data over the Indian Ocean. So the rogue MH370 pilot was at the controls until the end of the 7-hour flight. That changes everything, and only 20 pieces of wreckage, flaps, were recovered. Only 20, not 2 million, not 2,000, 20. The plane sank in one piece, therefore minimal debris was found. No seats, no luggage. The flaps were worn away at the trailing edge, not the leading edge, which implies that the plane didn't strike the water hard. The engines were still running to power the flaps hydraulics, meaning that MH370 wreckage could be located anywhere, hundreds of miles from the last GPS ping. In other words, the search is futile. Vance would know because the Canadian investigator examined 2 million pieces of wreckage after the 1998 Swiss air crash. The MD-11 came down hard on the North Atlantic Ocean because of fire. I vaguely remember that one. Similarly, the French captain joined the Mile High Club where Air France 447 fell out of the sky in 2009. Most of us should remember that one. Here's a great video of leaving thousands of pieces of debris. The pitot tubes froze over, so they just got disorientated on their speed readings. But only 20 pieces of MH370 washed ashore months later, all connected to a low-speed ditching in the southern Indian Ocean by a professional pilot. Once you understand that, it takes a little while to understand that. That changes a lot. So essentially what you have, the MH370 flaps had damage similar to that of U.S. Airways Flight 1549, which landed on the Hudson River in New York City. That was probably about a decade ago, in 2010, 2015, I don't remember. The Miracle in the Hudson, but the controls of the rough Indian Oceans. Think about Captain Sully or Tom Hanks behind the controls. But there's not some benevolent pilot. It was a guy trying to ditch a plane to make it disappear forever. The MH370 rogue pilot ditched the plane to hide it forever. The smoking gun, it was like Ralph Barrick and the DARPA diffuse, a pre-confession of the crime of creating COVID. The MH370 pilot had a home simulator with the planned route. Once you understand the pilot ditched the plane to sink as one piece, you realize MH370 is literally anywhere but the last GPS coordinate. He flew south to see the sun rise, making the water landing easier. It's a creepy end to a sad story, but don't worry, the passengers were all knocked out when they turned off the air to the cabin, and he basically flew it for 7 hours into the southern Indian Ocean with himself behind the controls, this rogue pilot. The parallels between the Wuhan wet market debate and the MH370 search are unreal. To me, it is at least. The seventh arc was the Wuhan wet market. While the lab leakers think someone evil did it, DARPA diffuse tells us someone like Ralph Barrick did it. While lab leakers debate Wuhan, a bunch of evidence washed ashore in North Carolina, the University of North Carolina. Frederick Bastiat called it the seen versus the unseen in my Bayesian hit piece. I won't go to that here, but it's just a parallel to the Wuhan market. So the UK, German, and Australian media have covered Larry Vance's story, but not the US. I don't think any US media has touched him. It's just a weird bubble that we get into here in the US media, along with the lab leak debate. This was a murder-suicide run by a Malaysian pilot, and the MH370 wreckage won't be found. Larry Vance said this a decade ago, and $100 million, he was right. It's not what people want to hear. Something bad happened, and someone bad did it. Much like lab leakers, the internet ran with evidence-free conspiracies, fire, hijacking, malfunction, a U.S. airbase, UFOs, etc. Since no debris field was left to analyze, the imagination ran wild. One aviation journalist, Jeff Wise, you'll find him all over the internet, claimed that the Russians did it. Another internet conspiracy said that the U.S. did it. That's probably me and LabLeak. Kim.com offered $100,000 to anyone who could disprove the U.S. military did it with portals. He lost. Root claimed they were involved in the LabLeak debate. Also offered Kim.com $100,000 on their 93% certainty of a pilot suicide. But Larry Vance said he was 100% certain. The internet used 280 Twitter characters to push a conspiracy, but Larry Vance wrote a 200-page book. I want to read this quote because it's so brilliant. Because I've come across it. I feel like myself being a Larry Vance Jr. As I've shown in my book, Larry Vance, MH370 Mystery Solved, the evidence to disprove a high-speed diving crash and to support a pilot-controlled ditching is overwhelming. All of the evidence I used to explain what happened in MH370 was available to the official investigation, yet they failed to uncover it. The fact that such a high-profile investigation failed to uncover and disclose such a basic evidence is cause for grave concern. What assurance can we have that future investigations will not suffer from equal ineffectiveness? Some of the top air safety investigation agencies in the world were involved in the MH370 investigation. According to authorities, the official accident investigation included experts from Malaysia, Australia, China, United Kingdom, United States, and France. To be effective, you do not need to be the loudest voice in the room. In fact, you should be wary of the loudest voices. Do not assume that those with the most forceful opinions are delivering the most accurate assessments. Seek out and work with those who have expertise you need to satisfy your curiosity. Then check, then double check. An overactive ego can hurt your ability to find and assess the evidence. So yes, I've come across this recently with the World Health Organization and SAGO, who I've debated about the lab leak origins. And it's a very similar thing. Even though we've agreed to disagree, I feel like I've won the debate there, as has Larry Vance won with this giant entity he went up against. So the official investigation even referenced the independent group, kind of like drastic. You can judge a man by his enemies. Vance's reward for his brilliance: ad hominem attacks, let alone avoid social media to prevent being hijacked. The American who collected the African debris was accused of being a Russian spy. I once made the mistake of going on Twitter, he said. Basically, these people are cyber terrorists, and it works. It's effective. I can say the same thing for Lab Leak. The experts that wind up on the podcast, Netflix, Jeff Wise, Richard E. Bright, have one thing in common. They don't like Larry Vance. The Australian search director dismissed Vance's theory, not because it was flawed, but because accepting it would have made his $150 million search pointless. After Ocean Infinity's last search turned up nothing, some members of the IG group reluctantly discussed Vance's theory.
On the bottom of the ocean right now, as I see it, the fuselage is in one piece, the left wing is still on it, the right wing may be off, the engines are separate, but you basically have 4 pieces of airplane down there. It's not scattered all over the bottom of the ocean.
Larry Vance believes MH370 is still largely intact because he's sure Captain Zahari ditched it deliberately. In more heroic circumstances, other pilots have proved that a water landing is possible. The images of the Miracle on the Hudson, US Airways Flight 1459's crash landing on New York's Hudson River in 2009, are unforgettable. Another infamous water landing, Ethiopia Airlines Flight 961, hijacked and out of fuel, captured on amateur video. Miraculously, 50 of the 175 people aboard survived. Even in the worst conditions, controlled water landings can leave the plane largely intact with little wreckage. And the wreckage so far recovered from MH370 may be further evidence it was piloted to the end and was not a high-speed impact. Larry, for you, what is the significance of the first bit of debris that washed up off Africa?
Tara, if this was a high-speed dive, this piece would not exist.
Larry Vance believes this recovered flaperon from MH370's right wing, reconstructed for the official ATSB investigation, would have been massively damaged if there'd been a high-speed crash.
What would happen instead is that this piece would hit at a great high speed, and the front of it would be crushed in. It's hollow, the water would invade inside, and it would just explode from the inside out. So this piece would not even exist.
And to Larry, there are other damning clues. The erosion of the flaperon's trailing edge.
Would happen because the flap was extended down, and the forces of the water would be enormous, and this is what made this all erode here at the back.
The flaps could not be extended down unless a pilot was in control of the aircraft. And the reason for doing that would be to land the plane, thereby keeping it intact, leaving as little debris as possible. Martin, does the ATSB accept that the flaps were down?
That was not the assumption when we were defining our search area.
Do you have proof that they weren't extended?
No, and this is the point that we've been trying to make, that there are two viable theories, that someone was at the controls of that aircraft and applying control inputs at the end of flight, or they were not. And there's evidence that supports both of those theories.
I think that most people will agree that the flaps were down. Not only were they down, they were fully extended.
All we're saying at the moment, Larry, is that the evidence is not yet sufficient to draw as firm a conclusion as you appear to have done.
My contention is that the starting point up here is not supported by the evidence.
So which parts of the evidence are not correct?
The fact that the airplane ran out of fuel. It didn't run out of fuel. The fact that
So your evidence for that is?
the fact that the flaps were down and it conducted a controlled
The
ditching.
fact that
You can't get
the speculation the flaps may have been down.
Well, now it's speculation to you. To me, there's evidence to support it.
And this ditching would not be something that would be easily done. What would be the average wave height on that day? Do you know?
3 to 4 meters.
3 to 4 meters. That's quite sizable waves that is going to create a lot of damage on the airplane.
I think you could do a successful ditching in a big aircraft in that sea. As Larry is saying, I think you could end up with most of the aircraft intact. I agree with you. The fact is that this is planned meticulously to make the aircraft disappear, and therefore, if I'm going to make the aircraft disappear, I will be there at the end, unless something bad has happened to me. Like
to do a controlled ditching.
I will continue to be there. I will make sure I'm there to the end.
If you assume that it went into the ocean under control at landing speed, then the idea of it fracturing into tens of thousands of pieces goes down dramatically. I think it's probably also possible that the airplane is in multiple large pieces.
So you think that Larry's interpretation has merit?
It absolutely has merit.
Adding weight to the rogue pilot scenario that Captain Zahari planned to stay at the controls until the end was an eerie flight simulation found on his home computer, charting a course that ended in the southern Indian Ocean. Simon Hardy reveals a stunning
So, Larry Vance reminds me of Major Joseph Murphy, and everyone else reminds me of lab leakers. Lab leakers wanted to look at the crash site, the one at Market, while Murphy sat in the back of the DARPA room and pieced together the evidence. For example, immune evasion. He was a live attenuated vaccine. Lab leakers wanted to debate SARS-2 lineage A and B in Wuhan, but WA1 flew back to America. Lab leakers claimed China did it, but Major Murphy told us America did it. Both MH370ers and lab leakers think evil forces were behind this, but the experts did it, and the other experts helped cover it up. Global lab leak media and U.S. government reports referenced the Paris group, but Major Murphy wasn't mentioned. The independent group of online MH370 sleuths was also referenced in the official crash report, but Larry Vance wasn't mentioned. Why? Vance doesn't advance the search for MH370. The ATSB acknowledges the extensive contributions to many of the individuals, and they basically list everyone except Larry Vance. And something similar came out with lab leakers listing every contribution except for Major Murphy. So Major Murphy is the one that leaked DARPA Diffuse and said it's American-created bat vaccine, is the one that led me down the path to write my own book. So I won't get into that here. But as someone told me online when I was talking about why is no one talking about Larry Vance, aviation interest who opposed Vance, just like Major Murphy didn't advance the search for the Wuhan Institute of Virology. So where's MH370? Vance won't guess and wrote in the book, if you accept the evidence that a pilot was controlling a functioning airplane, then you have to accept the calculations that are not valid. Unlike the autopilot, the pilot can and did take independent actions. Without the certainty provided by the unpiloted airplane assumptions, it is not possible to use the handshake data with the Inmarsat satellite to predict where or when the airplane started to descend, or which direction it traveled during its descent, or its airspeed during the descent, or its rate of descent. During the flight south, the pilot could have changed altitude, changed the power setting. That would affect fuel consumption, maximum range. It is impossible to know how much fuel remained in the tanks after the last handshake. Therefore, it is not possible to accurately predict how long and how far the airplane flew after the last handshake. It is impossible to establish when the airplane entered the water. So Vance's buddy, we'll take a guess, and thanks, it's just south of the original search area in a deep trench and earthquake zone. It's a bit of a conspiracy probably, but it's kind of fun. Vance's other buddy thinks it's the opposite side. No one knows. We will never know, because the pilot ordered extra fuel and oxygen for the kamikaze run to nowhere. Like Barrick with his no-see biotechnology, he probably aimed to keep the world guessing about their intent. And the last chapter of Larry Vance's book, he speculated on the pilot's motives. In his own morbid Mile High Club, he joined his own Mile High Club before plunging into the unknown, therefore leaving no trace of the crime. He thinks he knocked out the passengers and more importantly, the stewardess, and probably had, a fixation on one of them and wanted to have his way with her before taking his own life with the rest of them. So I don't want to get into that here because it's a bit morbid, but it's probably the best explanation I've heard for why he did something like this. He wanted that airplane cabin to himself for multiple hours because he was the only one still alive, but it was flying. So we'll end it with Mark Twain. History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. So I'll end it there. It's a bit of a twist and parallel to what I've been writing about for the past few years. So I consider MH370 to be mystery solved, and I believe COVID-19 to be mystery solved. But you can be the judge of that. So take care. Bye.